The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 941. Kate Gannon's body trembled slightly, her face flushed with anger. She hadn't expected Jason to be so brazen and vulgar. In her fury, she raised her hand and slapped Jason again. Jason, thinking Kate was just a weak woman, didn't take her seriously and swung his good hand to grab hers. With a loud crack, the sound of breaking bones echoed. "Ow!" Jason screamed in agony. Kate had broken his remaining good arm at the forearm. Both of Jason's arms were now useless. He stared at his arms, one freshly broken, the other bleeding profusely, feeling his heart shatter. He jumped around in pain, screaming and cursing, his eyes filled with rage. He shouted to his lackeys, "Get her! Everyone gets a share if we take her down." Hearing this, Jason's lackeys, initially fearful, became frenzied at the thought of a share. "Grab that woman. I'm going to have her. Must have this woman." They charged at Kate like a pack of rabid dogs. Hearing their words, Kate's anger reached a boiling point. In her fury, she moved swiftly into the crowd, swinging her fists, knocking them down one by one. "Ow! Mommy!" The scene quickly turned into chaos, filled with screams of pain. Kiran paid no attention to the chaos. He walked over to help Janice Rolf up. She lay on the ground, covered in dust, her pants torn from the fall. Janice still held the medicine, her face swollen and red. Seeing Kiran, Janice felt a surge of relief and began to cry. Though furious, Kiran held back, speaking gently, "Let me treat your injuries so your mother doesn't see." Janice nodded, her eyes wide with shock, wondering how Kiran could heal her. Kiran guided her to the side, took out silver needles, and began treating her wounds, massaging her injuries afterward. Within minutes, the swelling on Janice's face had vanished, though her jeans remained torn, exposing her white knees and making her blush. "That's it. Go upstairs," Kiran said. Janice nodded and headed upstairs with the medicine. Meanwhile, Kate had finished off all the thugs. Her face still bore a look of fury, her eyes filled with a desire to kill Jason and his men. Lying on the ground, they looked at Kate as if she were a tigress, their hearts filled with fear. Seeing Kiran, Jason felt both anger and hatred but didn't dare speak. Beep, beep! Just then, a car horn sounded at the entrance. Everyone turned to see a brand-new Volkswagen Phaeton drive in. Kiran saw the car and smiled, especially when he saw that Easton Moor was driving it. His smile widened. Jason recognized Easton Moor and, seeing him as a savior, shouted, "Young Master Moor, you must avenge us!" Easton was taken aback seeing Jason. Jason had been his sidekick for years, helping him with many women in Belleford, and had even shared those women with him. Seeing Jason beaten, Easton was shocked. "Jason, what happened?" Easton asked angrily as he got out of the car, not noticing Kate and Kiran. "That woman beat me." Jason pointed at Kate. Kate had her back to Easton. Easton found her silhouette familiar but couldn't place it. "Young master, I found this woman for you. She's very charming, but she's a fiery one and beat me up," Jason said, looking miserable. Hearing Jason say he found a woman for him, Easton, trusting Jason's taste, felt she must be good. Staring at Kate's alluring silhouette, Easton's heart raced with excitement. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Kate's fists clench tightly. His mind went blank as if doused in cold water. He recognized Kate. Thinking of Kate, Easton was filled with fear. Jason, unaware of Easton's fear, continued, "Young master, this woman is very alluring, untouched by anyone. If you—" "Shut you up," Easton interrupted, his face turning pale with fear. Jason was startled, looking at Easton, confused and unwilling to give up. "Young master, she really is beautiful." "If you—" "Shut the hell you up," Easton cursed, rushing over and kicking Jason twice. "Shut your mouth." Thinking of his father's fear of Kate, Easton knew offending her was courting death. Jason, already with 2 broken arms, was in utter misery after Easton's kicks, crying out in pain. Jason's lackeys were too terrified to speak. "Inspector Kate, I'm sorry." Easton apologized to Kate with a smile. Kate turned to face him, her expression icy. Seeing it was indeed Kate, Easton was even more terrified. "Inspector Kate, what's going on?" Kate pointed at Jason. Easton's face turned pale, sweat beading on his forehead. I don't know, slap." Kate slapped Easton hard. "You don't know?" His already battered face looked even worse. Covering his aching face, Easton didn't dare explain. "He tried to sleep with me and got beaten up." Kate pointed at Jason. Easton shivered. Was he trying to sleep with Kate? Was he insane? He wanted to kick Jason to death. Jason, beaten by Easton, felt aggrieved, but seeing this, was terrified and speechless. Jason even shook his head, relieved he was still alive. Kate sneered at Easton. "Now he's offering me to you. Do you dare accept?" Hearing this, Easton felt a rush of panic. This was a disaster. His legs gave out and he knelt. "Inspector Kate, spare me!" "Is Easton Moor kneeling?" Seeing this, Jason's eyes nearly popped out in shock. Jason's lackeys quickly followed suit, kneeling in fear for their lives. The scene fell into a dead silence. Chapter 942. Kate Gannon, though angry, felt somewhat satisfied seeing Easton Moor's reaction. Her biggest fear now was Kiran York getting angry. If Kiran got angry, she believed the Moor family could face complete annihilation. Kate turned to Kiran, seeking his opinion on whether he could forgive the kneeling plea. Kiran looked at Easton with an expressionless face. Easton, feeling Kiran's gaze, was filled with terror and anxiety as if pierced by sharp swords. The scene of Hogan and Horan being killed flashed in his mind. To him, Kiran was far more terrifying than Kate. Kate commanded respect due to her status, but Kiran was someone who would end lives without hesitation. Kiran's gaze then shifted slightly to Jason. Jason, thinking Easton feared only Kate and not Kiran, quickly appealed to Easton. "Young master! This bastard broke my arm. If not for him, I would have delivered Janice Rolf to you. You must avenge us!" Jason, unaware of Easton's fear of Kiran, shouted loudly. Easton, hearing Jason's outburst, felt his body tremble in fear. Was Jason trying to hasten his own death? He turned angrily to Jason. "Shut up! Stop talking nonsense!" Jason shivered, looking at Easton in shock. "Young master, I'm Jason." "I told you to shut up!" Easton yelled, nearly scared to death. Kate was not to be trifled with, and Kiran was untouchable. Was Jason trying to get them all killed? Jason, too frightened to speak, watched as Kiran walked towards him. Jason, filled with both anger and fear, felt extremely conflicted. Kiran reached Jason, who lay on the ground, unable to move his arms but still wriggling slightly. Jason looked up at Kiran. "What are you going to do? Did you help the Moors bully the Rolfs?" Kiran asked coldly. Jason, terrified by Easton's glare, quickly shook his head. "No." "No?" Kiran smiled coldly at Jason. Jason nodded frantically. "No." Kiran's smile turned even colder. Jason sensed something was wrong. Just as he was about to speak, Kiran's foot came down. Crack! The crisp sound of bones breaking echoed in the courtyard of the Shangri-La Hotel. The onlookers shivered, feeling a chill down their spines. "Ah!" Jason screamed in agony, his eyes wide as he saw his left leg shattered. He was now severely crippled. Overwhelmed by pain and despair, he collapsed to the ground, his face twisted in agony, howling in pain. "Keep talking. Is it true or not?" Kiran asked coldly. Jason, in excruciating pain, was terrified beyond belief. Kiran seemed like a god of death, for whom killing was as easy as slaughtering chickens. Easton trembled all over, wanting to stop Jason, but seeing Jason already mentally broken, he remained silent. Jason, crying, looked at Kiran. "It was the Moor family that made us persecute the Rolfs." Easton felt as if he had been struck by lightning, staring at Jason in disbelief, filled with hatred but unable to speak. Kiran turned to Easton. "Why did the Moor family persecute the Rolfs?" Easton, under Kiran's cold gaze, trembled as if death had locked onto him. He struggled to speak, his tongue failing him. Kiran looked at Kate. "I need an explanation for this, or face the consequences." Kate's heart sank. The Moor family had indeed caused trouble. However, thinking of how Janice Rolf was bullied, even she was angry. They were simply inhuman, mere beasts. The Moor family deserved no pity. Kate looked at Easton. "Go home and get an explanation from your family." "Yes, yes." Easton, frightened, agreed and ran away as if he had been granted a reprieve. As he reached the car, he remembered it was the one bought for Kate and hurried back, handing the keys to Kate. "This car is for you, I don't want it. Get lost," Kate yelled. Kiran, however, took the keys. "I'll take it." Easton, too scared to refuse, nodded repeatedly before running away. Jason and his lackeys also scrambled away. Kiran parked the car, satisfied, and headed upstairs. The Moor family's issue could wait. They couldn't escape him. Kate, standing downstairs, looked at the mess and felt her mind in turmoil. Would Kiran wipe out Tigergate as well? The once mighty Imperial Dragon had already seen the destruction of Wolfgate, Panthergate, and Liongate. Losing Tigergate, too, would be a significant blow. Her eyes were filled with worry and tension. Yet, considering the Moor family's actions, she felt they deserved it. They brought it upon themselves. Kate, feeling conflicted, went upstairs to wait for the Moor family's explanation. When Kiran returned to Judy Quant's room, Lilian Yanez had already left. Janice was with her mother, not mentioning the earlier beating. Seeing Kiran enter, both mother and daughter were overjoyed. "Young Master York." Kiran nodded slightly, looking at Janice. "Go prepare the medicine, here's how." Janice memorized the instructions and left. As Kiran was about to leave, Judy suddenly called out, "Young Master York, please wait." Kiran paused. "What is it?" Judy seemed hesitant, but, after a moment, looked at Kiran and asked, "What is your relationship with Lilian Jans?" "Siblings," Kiran replied briefly. "I feel that's not quite right," Judy said, observing Kiran. Kiran, considering Judy's background and the Rolf situation, decided there was no need to hide. Originally, she was arranged as my fiancée by my mother, but now we're like siblings. "Oh," Judy responded, dragging the word, looking thoughtful. "Is there something else?" Kiran asked, curious. "I think Lilian Jans might be the daughter of an old acquaintance, so I was curious," Judy said as if she had more to say but held back. Kiran was puzzled. "Which old acquaintance?" "It's just a guess, but I'll tell you something," Judy said seriously. "What is it?" Kiran asked. "A girl like Jade named Lilian?" Judy said gravely. Kiran raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that Lilian Jana's name? I can only tell you this much. The rest is up to fate," Judy said, stopping there. Kiran, puzzled and deep in thought, left and headed to Lilian's room. Chapter 943. "Finished handling everything?" Lilian Jans asked coolly. "The Moors in Belleford are nothing but tyrants. They deserve to die," Kiran York said, deliberately sounding severe and discontented. Lilian did not comment, remaining expressionless as if the matter did not concern her. Kiran was slightly taken aback. His previous remark was intentionally provocative, aimed at gauging Lilian's reaction. Because he couldn't understand why Kate Gannon was so adamant about protecting the Moor family, he hoped to see Lilian's true thoughts. Unfortunately, he couldn't discern anything. Lilian glanced at Kiran. "If there's nothing else, please leave. Judy Quant and her daughter occupy my room." "I have nowhere to stay," Kiran said, pretending to be stubborn. "Do you dare sleep here?" Lilian's cold face and displeased tone made Kiran shiver slightly, his eyes showing a trace of fear. "If you want to sleep here, I won't stop you if you're not afraid," Lilian said, producing a gleaming dagger from her fair hand. Kiran felt a chill down his spine, looking at Lilian, and tentatively asked, "Are you planning to use that knife? Experiencing the feeling of being killed isn't appealing?" Lilian retorted, not denying it. Kiran recalled being beaten by Lilian last time and instinctively took a step back. Just as he was about to leave, Lilian said, "Stay here." Kiran was stunned. Wasn't she just driving him away? He didn't understand what Lilian meant. Lilian pointed to a box on the floor. "Start practicing the joyful Odyssey now." "You brought a harp?" Kiran asked curiously. "What do you think?" Lilian retorted with a cold face. Remembering that Lilian had mentioned training his mental strength through the joyful Odyssey, Kiran quickly nodded. "Okay." "Start now," Lilian said, gracefully leaping onto the bed. "If your playing can make me fall asleep, you'll pass today. Otherwise, expect a beating." She closed her eyes slightly, not waiting for Kiran's response. Kiran, puzzled by Lilian's intentions and a bit frustrated, opened the box, took out the harp, and began playing. Lilian lay on the bed, her breathing steady, her eyes slightly closed, feeling the momentum and melody, adjusting her breathing to become smooth and natural. Initially, Kiran played to appease Lilian, but soon he was immersed in it. Especially thinking of Aoki Kostner in Sunland, possibly in Lady Mel's hands, life and death unknown, filled him with anger and urgency. His playing sped up, and the momentum of the joyful Odyssey seemed to grow stronger, like 1,000 horses galloping, filled with killing intent. Thinking he had reached a good state, Kiran's playing became even faster and more intense. Slap. Suddenly, Kiran's hand was slapped heavily, pulling him out of his musical trance. "Ah!" Kiran exclaimed, clutching his chest, feeling like he was about to vomit blood. Slap! Slap! Lilian's white, jade-like hands slapped Kiran's back repeatedly like a demon's hand. Kiran's body was in pain, but the internal energy in his abdomen gradually stabilized. Thud. Lilian's final kick sent Kiran onto the bed. He bounced a few times, but his breath was now even, and his face calm. However, Kiran still felt the killing intent and the turbulent energy in his mind unending. "Do you have a death wish?" Lilian's angry voice echoed. Kiran was stunned, looking at Lilian's icy, murderous face, and tentatively asked, "What just happened?" "I had you practice the joyful Odyssey to train your mental strength, but your mind was full of slaughter." "Such an aura will only harm you," Lilian said, looking at him with disappointment. "If I hadn't been here, you might have been crippled." Kiran's face turned red with embarrassment, and he could only nod. "I'm sorry. I lost control thinking about Lady Meiji and Aoki Kostner, and it filled me with killing intent." Lilian's beautiful face showed disappointment. "If you can't control your emotions, you'll die sooner or later." She turned and left in anger. Kiran lay on the bed, his body aching, but feeling more oppressed by his failure. He tried to control his emotions but failed repeatedly. Feeling self-doubt, Kiran wondered if his mental strength was indeed insufficient. Trying to gather his mental energy, he sat up, crossed his legs on the bed, and focused on the melody of the joyful Odyssey, letting go of anger and hatred. His mind gradually calmed, and the turbulent energy began to dissipate, leaving him at peace. Standing at the door, Lilian sensed Kiran's change and felt relieved. He was intelligent and could grasp her intentions. She had stayed to help Kiran overcome his inner demons, knowing that without overcoming them, he would never achieve true mastery. Lilian went to Kate Gannon's room. Seeing her, Kate was warm. "Did you just play the harp in your room?" Lilian didn't clarify it was Kiran. "We're going to the Moor family now." Hearing that Lilian intended to visit the Moor family, Kate was puzzled. "Are you going personally?" Lilian didn't respond, turning to leave. Kate, knowing Lilian's aloof nature, felt helpless. Despite being an inspector feared by many, Foxgate was an exception. Knowing Lilian's integrity and pride, Kate was even more concerned, quickly following. The two headed to the Moor family. At the Moor residence, Easton Moor had just finished recounting the events at the Shangri-La Hotel and Jason's crippling to Hiram Moor, whose face was cold and dark. Chapter 944. "Father, this Kiran is too arrogant. If this continues, we might lose our lives," Easton Moor said to his father, Hiram Moor, with a hint of unwillingness. Hiram's expression changed several times before he focused on Easton and asked, "What's the status of Jason and the others?" "They've gone home to recover," Easton replied. Hiram remained silent, his eyes narrowing slightly as a cold, murderous intent flashed in them. Seeing his father's expression, Easton felt a mix of anger and a sense that he might take drastic action. "Dad, are you? Inform Elton from Romance Country that Jason is planning to betray them," Hiram instructed. Easton's eyes lit up with delight. "I understand." Hiram said no more, but his eyes showed satisfaction. He cared little for the lives of Jason and the others. In fact, he thought it better if they were dead. Easton left the house and headed to the Belleford Villa to find Elton. Shortly after Easton left, Lilian, Janice, and Kate Gannon arrived at the Moor residence. The Moor family members recognized Kate and, remembering how even Hiram treated her with respect, greeted her respectfully. "Good day, Inspector Gannon." Kate paid no mind to their respect and walked straight inside. Lilian followed her silently. Hiram had already been informed of their arrival and quickly came out to greet them. From a distance, he called out, "Good day, Inspector Gannon." Kate saw Hiram and without any emotion said, "I'm not well." Hiram's face changed dramatically upon hearing this unexpected bluntness. He quickly composed himself and said, "Inspector Gannon, please feel free to criticize us." "Criticize?" Kate scoffed. "Doesn't your family know what they've done?" Hiram knew she was referring to the Rolf family's situation. Unable to hide it, he decided to come clean. "Inspector Gannon, our actions regarding Belleford Mountain were indeed excessive, but it was all under the directive of Imperial Dragon Headquarters." "Imperial Dragon Headquarters?" Kate's tone was skeptical. Hiram nodded firmly. "Without their directive, why would we attempt to seize Belleford Mountain?" Kate's expression grew more serious. She glanced at Lilian, seeking confirmation. As an inspector, she wasn't privy to all internal headquarters matters and couldn't be sure if Hiram was telling the truth. Lilian remained silent, sitting there as if none of this concerned her. Seeing that Kate seemed to believe him, Hiram continued, "Imperial Dragon Headquarters ordered us to secure Belleford Mountain for protection." "Did you collaborate with Romance Country to develop Belleford Mountain?" Kate asked, her eyes fixed on Hiram. A flicker of panic crossed Hiram's eyes but quickly vanished. He shook his head vigorously. "No, absolutely not. You know what kind of organization Imperial Dragon is. How could we collude with them?" Kate, hearing Hiram's firm denial, recalled Hiram's character and felt inclined to trust him. She looked to Lilian, hoping to gauge her thoughts. Lilian, however, remained silent, waiting for Hiram to continue. Kate knew Lilian was the key figure. Without her input, Kate felt uncertain. She turned back to Hiram and asked, "Why was the Rolf family so tragically persecuted, and did Romance Country have a part in it?" "We wanted Belleford Mountain but feared raising suspicions. Romance Country also had their eyes on the mountain, so we used them as a cover," Hiram explained. Kate glanced at Lilian again. Lilian stood up, her cold gaze sweeping over Hiram. Hiram felt uneasy under her stare and looked back at her. "When will Horace Moor come out of seclusion?" Lilian asked coldly. Hiram did not know Lilian's identity, so he could only hurriedly say, 3 more days. "You have 3 days to figure out how to save yourselves. Whether you survive is up to you," Lilian said, turning to leave. Hiram watched the unfamiliar yet stunningly beautiful Lilian depart, thinking she posed no danger. He dismissed her words. Kate, however, felt her heart tremble. She hadn't expected Lilian to be so angry. Seeing Hiram's reaction, she knew they were in deep trouble. Kate hurried to follow Lilian out. Hiram sent them off, but neither woman acknowledged him. On the way back, Lilian walked gracefully, refusing to take a car. Kate walked beside her. The two women, one in black and the other in white, looked elegant and alluring, catching the eyes of many passers-by. Kate's mind was in turmoil. She kept stealing glances at Lilian, trying to understand her thoughts. "You don't need to guess my thoughts." "The Moor family deserves to die," Lilian suddenly said to Kate. Kate's heart pounded as she looked at Lilian, still wanting to defend the Moor family. "I came to see if they had any sincerity left. They don't, so they deserve to die," Lilian said calmly. Kate felt a chill run down her spine at Lilian's calm words. Lilian continued, "I had hoped Kiran might spare them, but the Moors have given up on themselves." "Didn't Hiram say Romance Country was just a cover and there was no collaboration?" Kate asked, still not giving up. Lilian sneered, "Have you forgotten my identity?" "Of course not. You're the leader of Foxgate." "And what is Foxgate's role?" Lilian asked. Kate's face turned pale instantly. "Foxgate was known for gathering intelligence, so they would know best." Lilian was testing the Moor family's honesty. The Moors, thinking they could deceive Lilian, only made her angrier. Kate clenched her fists, her beautiful face showing anger. Imperial Dragon had already lost much, and she had hoped to save Tigergate. However, the Moors were beyond saving. Lilian said no more and returned to the Shangri-La Hotel. Kate knew the Moors were doomed and could only accept it. Unaware of these developments, Easton arrived at the Belleford Villa. He headed straight to Villa No. 3, the largest villa in the area, which belonged to the Moor family. However, it had recently been given to people from Romance Country. As he reached the villa entrance, two tall Caucasians came out to stop him. Easton could hear the sounds of men and women laughing inside. Chapter 945. "I am Easton Moor from the Moor family, here to see Mr. Elton," Easton said proudly to the two white men. In his mind, he was the owner of this villa and should be treated as such. However, the two white men sneered at him and said, "Mr. Elton is having fun and doesn't have time to see you." Easton felt humiliated, and his face turned red with anger. The white men glanced at his swollen face, still looking like a red swollen pig's head, and their eyes were full of mockery and disdain. Feeling their gaze, Easton became even angrier and couldn't help but shout towards the inside. "Elton, it's Easton. I'm here to see you." The two white men were evidently not expecting Easton to shout and became furious. One of them swung a fist at Easton. Easton had just been beaten by Kate and Kiran, but he was confident in his strength against the two white men. He dodged and countered their attack. Seeing Easton dare to fight back, the two white men became even angrier and attacked together. The three of them started brawling. Elton, having heard Easton's shout, came out from inside. Seeing the three fighting, he coldly said, "What are you doing? You're all on the same side." The two white men, hearing Elton's anger, immediately stopped and stood aside. Easton looked at Elton and said, "Mr. Elton, I have something to discuss with you." "Come inside," Elton said, turning back into the villa. Easton followed Elton into the villa. The living room was in disarray, with men's and women's clothes scattered everywhere. Some women were walking around barely dressed, completely ignoring Easton's presence. Easton was used to it. Many of these women had been provided by the Moor family to please Elton. To win Elton over, the Moor family had spared no expense, providing money and women. "What brings you to see me?" Elton asked Easton with a smile. "Kiran York has arrived in Belford. He intends to help the Rolf family reclaim Belford Mountain." "My father sent me to inform you," Easton said, not mentioning Jason's involvement as he wanted to protect him. Elton, who had been relaxed, changed his expression upon hearing Kiran's name. The teacup in his hand shattered on the floor. Crash! The teacup broke into countless pieces. The women inside screamed and scattered. Easton, shocked, turned pale and instinctively sat up straight. "Kiran dares to come to Belford and side with the Rolfs? He has a death wish," Elton said, his dark face filled with cold, killing intent. Easton, noting Elton's hatred for Kiran, relaxed and asked, "Mr. Elton, do you really hate Kiran that much?" "It's not just hate. I want to skin him alive," Elton said, his eyes filled with rage and pain. "A few days ago, my brother Els was killed by Kiran in Dragon City." "Kiran killed your brother?" Easton exclaimed in shock, but was filled with joy at this news. Elton ignored Easton's reaction, clenching his fist so tightly that his knuckles cracked. "Kiran not only killed my brother, but also slaughtered everyone my brother brought with him. Kiran is extremely ruthless. Today, my family tried to kill him. We sent Hogan and Horan, two of our best fighters, but Kiran killed them both in one move," Easton said, fanning the flames. "Where is Kiran? I want to kill him now," Elton said, unable to contain his anger. Easton, delighted but cautious, advised, "I suggest you lure him into Belford Mountain and ambush him there. It would be safer." Elton, initially furious, calmed down and smiled. That's a good idea. I'll consider it. Kiran is currently staying at the Shangri-La Hotel. You can kidnap Janice and her mother to lure him to Belleford Mountain, Easton suggested slyly. Elton, now beaming, gave Easton a thumbs up. Great idea. I'll arrange it now. I'll help you find out where Judy and Janice are staying, Easton said, taking out his phone. Elton also began making preparations to kidnap Judy and her daughter. Easton quickly found out that Judy and Janice were staying in room 773. He hung up and told Elton, Judy and Janice are in room 773. Leave the rest to me. Your family should stay out of it, Elton said, pleased. We're ready to help any time, Easton said enthusiastically. His principle was simple. Let Elton and his men take the risk. If they died, it didn't matter. It was just killing with a borrowed knife. Elton, eager for revenge for his brother, didn't suspect anything. After a brief discussion, Easton left. Elton then sent 2 men to the room opposite the Shangri-La Hotel to set up a sniper position. He also called a blonde woman named Beyoncé and instructed, go to room 773 at the Shangri-La Hotel and kidnap either Judy or Janice. Beyoncé, batting her eyes at Elton, asked, Mr. Elton, do you fancy Janice or the old woman? Elton caressed Beyoncé's body, saying, neither of them compares to your beauty and charm. Beyoncé, pleased by the compliment, nodded excitedly. As long as you know I'm pretty. I'm a woman, after all. Elton pulled Beyoncé into his arms, and they shared a passionate kiss. Beyoncé, slightly weak-kneed, left the villa and headed to the Shangri-La Hotel. Elton continued his preparations, sending more people to Belleford Mountain to hide. After finishing his arrangements, Elton, now happy, poured himself a glass of red wine and drank it, his eyes filled with joy. Whether he got Belleford Mountain or not was no longer important. What mattered was killing Kiran and avenging his brother. Elton was full of anticipation. Meanwhile, Beyoncé arrived at the Shangri-La Hotel. Her clicking high heels echoed down the hallway like the approach of a beautiful but deadly poisonous flower. Chapter 946. Beyoncé walked up to room 773, her eyes wary as she glanced around. The hallway was eerily quiet, with no one in sight. She gently tapped the door. Creak! The door lock clicked open. Beyoncé pushed the door and walked in calmly. Inside, Judy Quant was lying on the bed alone while Janice Rolf was out preparing medicine. Hearing the door open, Judy thought it was her daughter returning. Turning her head, she was startled to see a blonde woman with blue eyes. Just as she was about to speak, Beyoncé pointed a gleaming silver gun at her. Judy swallowed her words. Beyoncé approached and delivered a swift chop to Judy's neck. Judy didn't even have time to scream before she slumped unconscious. Beyoncé pulled the bedsheet over Judy, wrapped her up, and quickly left. The entire process was smooth and quiet, without alerting anyone. Beyoncé got into her car and called Elton. Is it done? Elton asked hurriedly. It's done. She's in the car and I'm heading to Belleford Mountain, Beyoncé said, starting the car while glancing at the unconscious Judy in the back seat, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Drop her off and then return. Leave the rest to them, Elton instructed. Hearing Elton's voice, Beyoncé sensed he had other intentions. Her eyes filled with hope and anticipation, a hint of joy flashing in them. All right, Mr. Elton, we'll reward you and have a good celebration when you get back. Heh. Elton's creepy laugh made Beyoncé's hands tremble as she drove faster toward Belleford Mountain. Meanwhile, Janice returned with the medicine and saw the door slightly ajar. Thinking her mother left it open for her, she pushed the door open. Seeing the empty bed, she froze. She quickly put down the medicine and called out to the bathroom. Mom, are you in the bathroom? There was no response. Janice frowned, quickly walking to the bathroom and knocking, but there was no answer. She pushed the door open and found it empty. Janice's frown deepened. After a moment's hesitation, she walked to room 777 next door, knowing it was Lilian Yana's room. At the door, she hesitated, then pressed her ear to the door, listening. Hearing nothing, she knocked. Who is it? Kiran York, who had just finished meditating, looked towards the door and asked. It's Janice Rolf. Hearing it was Janice, Kiran jumped to the floor and opened the door. What's wrong? My mother isn't in the room and I don't know where she went, Janice said, a hint of worry in her voice. Kiran's heart skipped a beat. He quickly walked past Janice into room 773. The moment Kiran entered, he smelled a strong perfume, not the scent of Janice and her mother. Seeing the bedsheet was gone, he had a bad feeling. Janice followed him in and said, I came back with the medicine, but she was gone. Your mother may have been kidnapped, Kiran said seriously. Kidnapped? Janice gasped, her face turning pale as she thought of the dangers. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. Don't cry. I'll check the surveillance, Kiran said, turning to contact the front desk before heading to the surveillance room. Kiran quickly found footage of Beyoncé's arrival and departure. His first thought was that the Moor family had kidnapped Judy. Seeing the footage, he was surprised it was a foreign woman. Returning from the surveillance room, he found Janice crying uncontrollably. Seeing Kiran, she rushed to him, grabbing his arm and crying, "Young Master York, was my mother really kidnapped?" "A blonde woman took her," Kiran nodded. "What?" Janice's eyes rolled back and she fainted. Kiran caught her, pressing pressure points to wake her up while softly calling, "Janice!" "Ah," Janice groaned, slowly opening her eyes. She grabbed Kiran's arm tightly, pleading, "Young Master York, please save my mother." "What happened?" Kate Gannon and Lilian returned just then. Kate spoke first. "A foreign woman kidnapped Judy Quant," Kiran said. Kate and Lilian were stunned. "Take care of Janice. I'm going to rescue her," Kiran said, looking at the two women. "I'll go with you," Kate said quickly. "No, you stay here." Kiran shook his head and walked out. "Why not?" Kate was worried this might involve the Moor family and was anxious. "You'll just be a burden." Kiran threw the words back, disappearing. "Kiran, you jerk!" Kate was furious, feeling like she was seen as a burden by Kiran. She shouted angrily after him, but he was already out of sight. "Take care of Janice," Lilian said before turning to leave. Kate was left fuming but softened seeing Janice crying. She decided to stay. Kiran went downstairs and got into his car, ready to leave, when he saw Lilian walking towards the car. Kiran stopped and looked at her. Lilian casually opened the passenger door and got in. "We're going to Belleford Mountain." "Why there?" Kiran asked. "Where were you planning to go?" Lilian countered. "The Moor family." Kiran's eyes narrowed. "They're collaborating with the Romance Nation. They should know where she is." "Go to Belleford Mountain," Lilian insisted. "You think the Moors and Romance Nation might act desperately to get the dragon's saliva?" Kiran asked. "Drive." Lilian didn't explain further. Kiran, a bit frustrated, started the car heading to Belleford Mountain. He wondered to himself, what kind of man would be interested in a woman like Lilian? Sensing his thoughts, Lilian shot him an icy glare sharp as a knife. Kiran shuddered, focusing on driving. "If you ever dare to think nonsense about me again, I'll kill you," Lilian threatened fiercely. Kiran shrugged. "I wasn't thinking anything." "You." Lilian's face turned icy. "You know exactly what you were thinking. What if I want to marry you?" Kiran suddenly dared to ask. "Do you want to die?" Lilian's anger flared, and she raised her hand to hit Kiran's head. Chapter 947. Beep beep. Kiran York didn't seem scared. Instead, he whistled twice on purpose, looking at Lilian with amusement in his eyes. Lilian's raised hand, poised to strike Kiran's head, stopped. She couldn't hit him, let alone kill him. Kiran deliberately pressed his face against Lilian's soft, fair hand. "Ah." Lilian was startled, letting out a gasp as she quickly withdrew her hand, her eyes filled with shock and panic. She hadn't expected Kiran to be so bold. Kiran whistled again and stepped on the gas, heading towards Belleford Mountain. Lilian, sitting in the passenger seat, was blushing with a mix of nervousness and confusion, flustered by Kiran's audacity. She never expected Kiran to start teasing her. Her mind was in turmoil. She wanted to hit him but couldn't. She couldn't say she had no feelings for Kiran. However, knowing that he already had Snow Xander, who was pregnant, made her feelings complicated. Kiran felt relaxed now. He had come to terms with his relationships with Lilian and Yvonne Quinn, knowing they were complicated. His wife, Snow, was off limits for now, so he hoped they could all get along and solve the current problem together. As for love, Snow was the one he truly loved. With Lilian, it was more of a familial affection. Lilian was lost in her thoughts. They drove to the base of Belleford Mountain where they could go no further. Kiran parked the car and checked around, noticing traces of a vehicle that had recently arrived and left. Lilian walked over, glanced at the tracks, and said, "It must be the car that brought Judy Quant." Kiran nodded and looked up at Belleford Mountain, which stood tall and majestic, covered in dense forests. Birds flew between the trees, and the chirping of insects created a peaceful atmosphere. However, thinking about the secrets hidden in the mountain and the lives at stake, Kiran couldn't help but feel angry, especially when he thought of the York family. "We should split up," Kiran suggested to Lilian. "I'll be in the open. You stay hidden," Lilian nodded, suggesting. "No way!" Kiran firmly rejected it. "It's too dangerous out in the open." "Aye, then I'll go alone," Lilian said, raising her hand to strike Kiran. Kiran felt frustrated, knowing he wasn't a match for Lilian. Reluctantly, he agreed. "Fine." Seeing Kiran agree, Lilian smiled and walked lightly into the forest. Kiran followed closely, staying vigilant and worried about her safety. Even though he knew Lilian was skilled in martial arts, he was still concerned. Lilian walked casually, occasionally stopping to smell flowers without picking them, showing her love for nature. Kiran watched her, seeing her as an innocent girl. His eyes naturally filled with affection. Lilian continued walking, relaxed and carefree. Kiran followed, keeping his distance as they moved deeper into the dense forest. Both became more cautious as the forest thickened. Lilian remained casual, smelling flowers, but her body was on high alert, ready for any attack. At that moment, snipers hidden in the forest saw Lilian entering their trap. Their orders were to kill Kiran, but seeing Lilian confused them. Her beauty was mesmerizing, and they didn't want to take their eyes off her. They even lowered their rifles, fearing an accidental discharge might harm her. Lilian, while walking, communicated silently with Kiran, constantly assessing the snipers' positions. They soon identified the locations of their hidden adversaries. With a mutual understanding, Lilian advanced toward the 12 o'clock position while Kiran moved from the 6 o'clock direction, aiming for 3 and 1 o'clock. Once they synchronized, they sped up. The sniper at 6 o'clock, fixated on Lilian's back, felt a sudden sting on his neck as if bitten by a mosquito. He struggled to breathe and tried to speak, but only exhaled before closing his eyes. A silver needle glinted in the sunlight on the back of his neck. Kiran reached the 3 o'clock position. The sniper there was still mesmerized by Lilian's beauty, his heart racing. Crack! The sniper's neck broke with a clear, crisp sound, unable to scream. Kiran leaped, throwing a silver needle at the 1 o'clock sniper. Alerted by the noise, the 1 o'clock sniper tried to fire but was too late. The needle hit his throat and he fell limp. Lilian reached 12 o'clock. The sniper there had already pulled the trigger, but Lilian moved like a ghost, disappearing from sight. The bullet missed, and as the sniper tried to fire again, a powerful force crushed his head with a sickening crack, scattering his brains. Bang! 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 The snipers at 9 and 11 o'clock fired. Lilian dashed forward swiftly. Kiran circled from 1 o'clock to 11 o'clock. The sniper at 11, quick to react, tried to retreat. The 9 o'clock sniper fired at Kiran to cover the 11 o'clock sniper's escape. Kiran's body vanished suddenly, reappearing in front of the 11 o'clock sniper. Shocked, the sniper hesitated, his eyes wide with fear. Bang! Kiran knocked him out. The 9 o'clock sniper tried to shoot, but Kiran's silver needle hit his forehead, killing him. The sniper who failed to kill Kiran was himself killed by Kiran. Kiran looked towards Lilian, who was coming down the mountain with Judy. "Are you okay?" Kiran asked. "She's just unconscious. There's no one else," Lilian replied. "You head back. I'll stay and check around," Kiran said, handing the car keys to Lilian without mentioning he left a sniper alive. Lilian didn't ask questions and helped Judy away. Kiran looked at the unconscious sniper, his eyes cold and murderous. Chapter 948. Ah! The sniper let out a scream and opened his eyes. He felt a burning pain in his right hand and looked down to find his index finger broken. The bone was exposed and blood was dripping. His face was filled with shock and disbelief as he looked at Kiran York. Kiran, with a calm expression, asked, "How does it feel now?" The sniper's heart was breaking from the pain. "Kiran, you're so cruel." Kiran looked at the sniper, a white man, and smiled. "Who brought you here from the Romance Nation?" "How did you know we're from the Romance Nation?" the white sniper asked, curious. "I've already killed Els." "I'm just wondering who else might come," Kiran said nonchalantly. The sniper's eyes flashed with anger. "You'll die a miserable death, you." Crack! Another clear sound of bones breaking was heard. Ah! The sniper let out a heart-wrenching scream as his right thumb was broken. You... The sniper looked at Kiran as if he was staring at a devil. "There are still 8 more fingers. No rush. We'll take our time. If the fingers run out, we can use the toes," Kiran said casually as if killing was a game. The sniper was terrified. Kiran made him feel worse than death. Seeing the sniper's change of expression, Kiran continued, "I think your comrades must feel very lucky." "Why?" the sniper asked nervously. "Because they died quickly and without pain. You're in so much pain that you'd rather be dead," Kiran sneered. The sniper felt as if his whole body was frozen. A nameless fear rose from his heart, spreading through his entire body. His eyes darted around, looking at Kiran, wanting to speak but not knowing what to say. "Still don't want to talk?" Kiran sneered, looking at another finger. The sniper's heart jumped to his throat, a sense of despair welling up. He burst into tears. I'll talk. Kiran stopped and looked at the sniper, waiting for him to explain. "We're Elton's men. He sent us to use that woman as bait to lure you in and kill you," the sniper cried. "Where is Elton?" "In Villa No. 3 on Belleford Mountain," the sniper quickly said. "Who's there with him?" "Our comrades, surrounded by snipers, and inside there are women for his pleasure," the sniper confessed. Kiran checked the time. It was just afternoon. He decided to deal with Elton later that night. The sniper looked at Kiran, wanting to plead for mercy. Whack! Kiran chopped the sniper's neck, making his eyes roll back as he fell unconscious. Kiran stood up and walked deeper into Belleford Mountain, wanting to find out where the dragon's saliva was hidden. As he walked, he noticed the place was deserted with no paths, which made him curious. According to Judy Quant, her family should have been here many times, putting a lot of effort into finding the red spring dragon saliva. So why were there no traces? The more Kiran thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong. He circled Belleford Mountain, but there were no signs of anyone having been there. Returning to his starting point, Kiran's face grew serious. Could the Quant family have lied? This thought crossed his mind, but was quickly dismissed. Judy and Janice Rolf would rather die than reveal the secret, wanting to take it to their graves. There was no reason to lie. Why? Kiran's eyes were filled with confusion and disbelief. He decided to search again. This time, he walked slowly, examining everything carefully. Soon, he noticed something strange. His own footprints and traces had disappeared. Kiran's eyebrows knitted together. Could the plants on Belleford Mountain have such miraculous self-healing abilities? He looked at the dense forest, tall trees reaching the sky, and lush undergrowth. A person seemed very small in comparison. Belleford Mountain felt mystical. Kiran decided to go back and ask Judy Quant before investigating further. Returning to the unconscious sniper's location, he found the sniper was gone, with no footprints left behind. Did he escape? Kiran's face darkened, but he quickly dismissed this possibility. The sniper rifle was still there, and he knew how hard he had struck. The sniper couldn't have woken up so soon. Instinctively, Kiran looked towards the 12 o'clock position. He walked over and found that even the person Lilian had killed was gone. Kiran was surprised and puzzled. He quickly checked the other locations where he had killed people, but they were all gone. Kiran was confused. These were people he had killed himself. How could they suddenly disappear? Who would want the bodies? Moreover, if someone had come, they should have been noticed. But there was nothing. Unwilling to give up, Kiran returned to the spot where the sniper had been unconscious. Still, no one was there. He picked up the sniper rifle and used it to dig into the ground. After digging a few inches, he touched something. Looking down, he found the sniper buried in the soil. Kiran's heart skipped a beat. He checked the sniper's nose and found no breath. He was dead. Who buried him? Kiran was full of questions. He went to other spots and started digging, also finding the bodies buried in the soil at varying depths, depending on the time of death. The earliest kill at the 6 o'clock position was buried almost half a meter deep. Kiran couldn't make sense of Belleford Mountain. He returned to the sniper's spot and saw the soil move as if it were alive, swallowing the sniper's body bit by bit, with the surrounding soil gradually falling and covering it. Kiran was stunned. What was going on? He watched as the sniper's body was buried and disappeared. Seeing the sniper rifle still unburied, he wondered if Belleford Mountain had a mind of its own. He heard birds chirping in the trees. He casually flicked his hand, and a bird fell to the ground, flapping twice before lying still. Kiran watched the bird's body. To his astonishment, it slowly sank into the ground and was also buried. Chapter 949. Belleford Mountain actually devours corpses. Kiran York looked up at the towering Belleford Mountain, unable to suppress his turbulent emotions. His mind was racing with complex and unimaginable thoughts. This outcome was beyond his imagination, and the situation was utterly baffling. He tested it several more times, and each time it was the same. Kiran couldn't make sense of Belleford Mountain. Finally, with many questions in mind, he left the mountain and headed to Elton's place. The Belleford Mountain villas were not far from the mountain itself, built at the foot of the mountain, hence the name. At the villa, Elton repeatedly dialed his subordinates' numbers, but there was no response, making him increasingly wary. After pondering for a moment, he looked at Beyoncé and cautiously said, "We need to leave now." "Leave?" Beyoncé asked curiously. "I suspect all the snipers have been killed," Elton said seriously. "That can't be." Beyoncé's eyes were filled with shock. If they had killed Kiran, they would have returned by now. The fact that they haven't means it's probably not looking good. Is Kiran really that formidable? Beyoncé still couldn't believe it. Hiram Moore said that Kiran easily killed the 2 experts sent by the Moore family, Elton said gravely. Hiss. Chapter 950. "Dad, what should we do?" Easton Moor asked his father cautiously. Hiram Moore's eyes flickered with various emotions. He looked at Easton and said, "Now, we have to find your grandfather." "Grandfather is still in seclusion, isn't he?" Easton asked nervously. "We can't worry about that now," Hiram said, his eyes flashing with helplessness. If they died, it wouldn't matter if Horace Moore lived. Easton's face changed several times, then he clenched his fist. "I've heard there's a secret in Belleford Mountain. I think Grandpa might know it. If he gets the secret, we won't have to fear Kiran York anymore, right? Hiram's expression changed, and then he smiled with joy. How did I forget that? Let's tell Grandpa quickly, Easton said excitedly. I've already come out of seclusion. A commanding voice came from the doorway. Dad, Grandpa, Hiram and Easton exclaimed excitedly. Tall, with white hair and beard, Horace Moor walked in. Despite being in seclusion for many days, he still looked vigorous, his face glowing with health. Seeing his father's good condition, Hiram was pleased and quickly said, Congratulations on your successful seclusion, Father. Horace nodded slightly. I felt the changes at home and came out early.